Good afternoon, everybody. On behalf of the Women Law Students Association at the University of Georgia School of Law, welcome to the 2012 Edith House Lecture. The Edith House Lecture series began in honor of the public service and pioneering spirit of Miss Edith House. She was co-valedictorian of her law school class in 1925, the first class to graduate women at Georgia Law. She went on to become an assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of Florida, a position she held for 30 years. She then went on to become the U.S. attorney in that district. The Edith House Lecture Series was inaugurated in 1983 and seeks to bring outstanding female legal scholars and practitioners to our university community. This year's honoree is Miss Leslie Turner, a woman whose extraordinary achievements are matched only by her grace and humility, traits I have already seen in the short time I have known her. Ms. Turner is a law graduate of Georgetown University, and she received her Master of Laws from American University. She began her legal career in 1985 as a law clerk to the Honorable William C. Pryor, former Chief Judge of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia. In 1986, she joined the litigation practice group of Aiken, Gump, Strauss, Hauerenfeld in Washington, D.C. In 1993, she accepted the U.S. Senate confirmed position of Assistant Secretary for the U.S. Department of the Interior, Office of Territorial and International Affairs. In that role, she managed the office that oversaw U.S. relations with such territories and federated states as American Samoa, the Commonwealth of the Northern Marianas, the U.S. Virgin Islands, Micronesia, and Palau. In 1995, she became counselor to then Secretary of the Interior Bruce Babbitt, and she also served as director of the Office of Intergovernmental Affairs. She returned to Aiken Gump in 1996 and practiced with that firm until 2006 when she joined the Coca-Cola Company. Today, Ms. Turner is General Counsel for Coca-Cola North America. We are so fortunate to have her with us today to share her insight into the law and the corporate world. Before Ms. Turner begins her remarks, I would like to make a special note that we have members of the Edith House family in our audience today. Thank you so much, Mr. and Mrs. Benton, and Dr. and Mrs. Donahue for being here with us. And now, if you could all please join me in giving a round of applause to this year's Edith House Lecturer and Guest of Honor, Ms. Leslie Turner.
Good afternoon to everyone gathered here today. A special shout out to the Coca-Cola interns who are here. And of course, many, many thanks and greetings to the Women's Law Students Association and Rachel Ivey for assisting and facilitating my time here with you today. I am appreciative of that introduction because, you know, at heart, I'm really just a Jersey girl. I'm from down the shore. I was born in a small town called Neptune, New Jersey. For those of you familiar with it, it's a town next to one called Asbury Park, where Bruce Springsteen performed at Stone Pony. So my hometown is next to Asbury Park. You know, the practice of law has allowed me to venture out far from the shore. I have traveled to places I never thought I would ever see. From around the United States, I've seen wonderful places: New Hampshire, Mississippi, Alabama, Texas, North Dakota, Idaho. On a global basis, I've been to places like India and China and Istanbul, Pakistan, Germany, Italy, Norway, Sweden. Imagine a Jersey girl traveling to all of those places. And it's all been a result of my practice of law. And finally, my practice of law has brought me here to Athens, Georgia. And I am so honored and I am so thrilled to be with you today. As you know, the Edith House Award, the lecture series, honors Edith House. And in my view, it really honors all women who pioneered a change in the way that society interacted with women. And it really represents women who challenged the view that society had of them and their role. Your own Edith House stands in great company with individuals like Arabella Mansfield, the first woman formally licensed to practice law in the United States; Charlotte Ray, the first African-American woman admitted to the bar, and the first woman to practice law in the District of Columbia; Minnie Hale Daniel, first woman to graduate from law school in Georgia; the Honorable Constance Baker Motley, first African-American woman appointed to the federal bench; the the Honorable Sandra Day O'Connor, first woman appointed to the Supreme Court, and most recently, the Honorable Sonia Sotomayor, the first Latina appointed to the Supreme Court. These and so many other women challenged the thinking of the day, and they had to be women of courage to do what they did. And it was against this backdrop of amazing women in the law that my thoughts crystallized about what I wanted to talk with you about today. And I want to talk about the role of corporate counsel. But I want to talk to you about the role of lawyer as counselor and the need for courage as we practice law. So I want to set a little bit of a backdrop for you and then move into that conversation. I call it a conversation. I'll talk with you for a little bit, and I really want us to dialogue because I get so much when I have these kinds of interactions and take back your thinking, your insights to my colleagues at the Coca-Cola Company. So you know that for-profit businesses, public companies, they're very focused on the bottom line. They're focused on increasing shareholder value. In plain terms, businesses are interested in winning. So, what's the role of the in-house counsel to secure that winning position? It's a role that's been redefined by this age of transparency, an age that's been ushered in by the reach of digital connections like Facebook and Twitter. It's the age of transparency that impacts how lawyers provide counsel, and it also impacts how businesses operate. You know, there isn't much that goes on in the world today that isn't known instantly. We have an explosion of information, accessible at the touch of a finger, available in the palm of our hands, in everybody's hands. It's broadcast on 24-hour-a-day media, it's blogged, it's texted, it's tweeted about. It's quickly analyzed and sometimes blown out of proportion and distorted, and thoughtful discussion about it might be the one thing that gets lost in the shuffle. We're living in a transparent, real-time society, and this transparency relates to what media reporters and bloggers and critics have to say, what consumers know and believe about a company's products and services, and communicate about that belief in social media and among their neighbors. It's what activists say and what they do and believe about a company's business. You know, you read in news articles and news reports how companies are in the market, how they're looking to increase their market share. We talk all the time in my company about what's our market share, what markets can we operate in. But you know, businesses don't operate in markets. They operate in communities, real, live places with real, live people. And businesses need the approval and the acceptance of real, live consumers who buy their products. And consumers need the approval and the benevolence of communities to support their businesses and worlds. This approval and acceptance by consumers and communities has been described most recently as a social license to operate. So I'm a little ahead of myself on my slides, but let's see. Okay. I came across this definition by Neil Gunningham about the social license to operate. And I really like that. You know, he says that the social license really isn't about technical requirements. It's not about legal processes and procedures. But the social license to operate is really about bridging the gap between the expectations of businesses and the communities in which they operate. Bridging the gap between the expectations of the wider society and their constituents. For those new to the term social license to operate, I paraphrased from the U.S. Supreme Court Justice Stuart Potter, you'll know it when you see it. So I want to take a look at a couple of things that I believe will bring home for us what the social license to operate is all about. We've seen in the papers, I'm sure, news about Apple and the allegations of labor abuse in China. And we also have most recently heard that some of the allegations of labor abuse are distorted. So, regardless of fact or perception, Apple has to address this issue to retain the acceptance and approval of its consumers. For the Coca-Cola Company, water use and water rights are social issues that requires us to be transparent about and committed to sustainable operating practices. You look at some of the disturbing news that we hear about Africa's diamond mine wars, labor issues, geopolitical conflict. And this is just another example of how businesses and governmental organizations have to be mindful of community and stakeholder concerns and interests. You know, addressing consumer and community concerns about the environment is what I call yesterday's news. Companies recognize this. And last October, Newsweek reported that companies that actively manage environmental matters actually outperform those that don't. In Newsweek's green rankings, companies that ranked in the top 100 of the 2009 ranking, weighted equally, outperformed the S&P 500 by 4.8% over the last 2 years. Being mindful of your social license to operate sometimes makes plain old good business sense. I want to share with you a comment that I read from a blogger, Larry Baca. And I thought his comment really brought home the whole meaning of the social license to operate. And he said he was watching a news interview, and there was a Peruvian partner of a U.S. mining company that was having troubles. And the Peruvian partner said, you know, I don't get this social license to operate stuff. I don't know what you're talking about. He says, I get my license from the Ministry of Mines in Lima. What are you talking about? And Baca says that later on, the only road that provided access to this mine was shut down by the local community because they were frustrated that they weren't able to resolve a lot of issues they had raised with the mining company. And once that access to the mine was shut down and the mine couldn't operate, that Peruvian partner understood what it means to have a social license to operate. You know, from all the news clips that we looked at, it's increasingly clear that what's important and critical to a company's sustained economic growth and consumer acceptance is the consistent renewal of the social license to operate. So let me bring our conversation home a little bit. You know that I work for one of, if not the most recognized brand in the world, right? Okay. So when I joined the Coca-Cola company, I learned about branding, so I'll just share with you two little things. I'll digress just a little bit. So, a little thing about branding. Apparently, there were some folks who were doing some studies, and they were conducting a study of how people can recognize different brands. And they gathered a group of people together in the dark, and they asked them to hold and touch and feel certain objects and identify what they were. Well, those folks were asked to hold and to feel our iconic Coca-Cola bottle. And there was no doubt in anyone's mind, in the dark, that that was a Coca-Cola bottle. Branding. The other thing I learned about the company, the strong brand that we have, is that next to the word okay, the word Coca-Cola is the most recognized word around the world. Strong, powerful brand, all right? So then, certainly, as an associate of the Coca-Cola company, I want you to make our company your first choice when you choose a beverage. And I know that you make your choices based upon great taste, our great advertising, and our wonderful promotions. But you know, we also know that that's not the only thing that drives your choice. That's not the only thing that drives a consumer to a particular company's products. We have learned that one of the reasons that consumers choose a company, or that our consumers choose our company, has a lot to do with how they feel about us as a company and as a corporate citizen. We earn our social license from you, from our consumers. For the Coca-Cola company, for any company, whether we're operating in the US or operating around the world, having a social license to operate means being a good steward of our consumers and our community's well-being and operating morally, ethically, and with integrity. Okay, so I'm sure you're sitting here thinking, this is very interesting, but you know, what does all this social license have to do, right, with my role as GC of the North American operations of a company with $15 billion brands. What does it have to do with being in-house counsel? What does it have to do with the practice of law? Well, I'll tell you that gaining and retaining a social license to operate requires in-house counsel to assess, to be cognizant of, to counsel on more than the letter of the law. In each of the examples that we looked at, from Apple to the water issues in India to diamond mining, in all of those examples, the lawyers had certainly performed their professional obligations. They knew how to dot their I's and cross their T's. Licenses were given, permits were obtained. There was robust negotiation around the labor issues and commercial terms, but still, the companies had difficulty or were challenged in their ability to reach their business obligations. And these challenges really represent, in my view, the interface between the social license to operate and the role of in-house counsel. That's where the interplay is. As lawyers, we have to be business partners and counselors. We have to understand what gets in the way of people wanting to receive and access our products, develop the best way to resolve conflicts, and understand how businesses make money. As I mentioned, for-profit corporations are about winning. That's what our shareholders demand. But as counselors, I believe that we have an obligation to advise our business colleagues on the importance of not simply winning, but winning with integrity. And that kind of winning can only be done through the lens of the social license to operate. You know, for me, the whole idea of social license to operate and the company's focus on winning to integrity really came to light when I joined the company's bottling investment group. It's called the BIG group. And that's a group where the company took all of its owned or managed bottlers and put them in one group. And they had a group of senior leadership team that worked with all the other business managers around the world. And I came in, when I joined the company in 2006, my first role was to work with the BIG group. And I was the counsel for our senior team, and I worked on building, in essence, a law firm inside the corporation for the BIG group, hiring lawyers around the world, working with lawyers around the world, and building our development, our infrastructure, and governance processes. And the president of the group said to me after I had been with the company for a few weeks, he said, "You know what, Leslie, we need more from you. We need you to tell us not only what we can do under the law, but we need you to tell us what we should do." Light bulb went off in my head. Transition from private practice to in-house counsel. Okay? A company's need to have a social license to operate means that as in-house counsel, we have to have what I call an unwavering focus, sort of a laser focus on what the company should do. And the should in this instance means that we take into consideration the needs, the interests, the concerns, the consumers of our brands, and the communities in which we operate. And then we advise our clients on what's the best course of action. What's the best course of action that we ought to undertake? And advising on what the company should do is the difference between being a lawyer and a counselor. Advising on what a company should do is the difference between being a lawyer and a counselor. It's showing leadership and being a partner with the business. Raising your hand can draw scrutiny, and it's not always the most comfortable space to be in. But being a counselor can make a palpable difference in how a company operates and how it's perceived. So let me tell you a little story about being a counselor. I had some business clients come and visit with me, and they weren't complaining outright, but they were kind of chattering about how the lawyers were slowing down, you know, a business deal they needed to get done with some suppliers. And we use suppliers for lots of things in my company, advertising, promotions, all kinds of suppliers. And I am really sensitive to people calling the legal department the sales prevention department. I'm really sensitive to that. And we try to counsel in a way that says, here's how you can do what you want to do. Here's how you can achieve your objective in the confines of the law. So when they came and they're sort of, yeah, your lawyer's just slowing down what we need to get done, I'm like, okay, I'm on it. Let me go check this out. And I go and I talk to the lawyers and I say, okay, tell me what's going on. And they said, you know, Leslie, this particular supplier, has some internal workplace rights issues. And we have a supplier code of conduct. And we really think that our business colleagues, and this was a great supplier that they worked with, wanted to work with, we really think that before we continue to do business with them, that they should get their house in order. Because who we do business with reflects on our social license to operate. It reflects on these principles and values that we say are important to us. The lawyers in that instance were talking as counselors, and they were raising questions that really required some robust dialogue. And ultimately, our business clients agreed, and we were able to resolve the issue. But it wasn't a comfortable space for the lawyers initially. They're on the front line. They're there facing the business colleagues, press of business, got to get this done. And the lawyer's saying, hold on, what are we doing? What are we about? That really demonstrates leadership, and in the long run, it actually protects the company's social license to operate. On any given day, advising a company on how it retains its social license to operate requires the lawyer to have a lot of courage, tremendous courage. Because the in-house lawyer repeatedly has to ask, is this action, is this plan, is this business objective consistent with our core principles as a company? Is it consistent with our stated mission, with the obligation to add value to our consumers and in the communities where we do business? Courage can be demonstrated in a lot of different ways. When I was thinking about courage, there are some big moments of courage and some very small, quiet moments of courage. And I recall a time that I was being given a behind-the-scenes tour of the U.S. Supreme Court in Washington, D.C. And the woman who was conducting the tour had been there for a long time, almost a historian. She was there when Sandra Day O'Connor was appointed, and that was in 1981, and I was there in about 2006, 2007. So she's been there for a long time. And she said, when Justice O'Connor came to the court, in the building, behind the scenes, there was only one room, one bathroom that was available, accessible to women. Only one had been set aside. And it's a huge building, huge complex there. And then she said, when she came, we all wore dresses, not so much by choice, but that was the uniform of the day. We wore dresses, we wore skirts, we had our little bows, we had our stockings, and it was hot as blazes. But we had the uniform on. And she said, a few weeks after she started, Justice O'Connor came to the courthouse and she was wearing, the historian said, a beautiful white pantsuit. The very next day, every single woman who worked in the courthouse had on a pantsuit. All right? Seemingly small thing, but the courage that it demonstrated to move against the expectation of how women should, what they should wear, how they should dress. And that demonstration of courage empowered other women to be courageous as well. Right? When I think about courage, I also think about the increasing number of general counsel who have been implicated lately in criminal activity, the regulatory scheme that's going on. They've been implicated with their business clients. And oftentimes, these are around things like backdating documents, failure to disclose material, relevant information to the public, misleading the public in press releases. And I think about how would my team of lawyers at the Coca-Cola company respond to these pressures, perhaps, that these GCs were under to win? How would we respond to these pressures to win? Not with integrity, but by any means necessary. And I thought how wonderfully grateful I am, how lucky I am to be with a company that really cultivates a culture of compliance, a culture of courage, a culture of winning with integrity. That really is the bottom line. And I think about the real estate debacle that we're in right now, and you think about all the different organizations that are involved, from lenders to real estate organizations to individuals, and I think there had to be a lawyer in that group as well. And was there a lawyer who raised her hand and said, you know what, this idea, to provide loans without adequate documentation doesn't make a lot of sense. Was there a lawyer in the room who said, you know what, taking these mortgage-backed securities and bundling the good ones and the bad ones together so we can't figure out what are the good loans and the bad loans doesn't make a lot of sense? Was there a lawyer in the room who raised her hand and had that conversation? Maybe there was, I don't know. But I think about the kind of courage that it would have taken to have that conversation. And then I think, in this form, in this environment where we're having our talk today, here in these halls where you debate and discuss the principles of law, I really hope and I really encourage you to talk about courage, to talk about being counselors, to talk about what it means to be a counselor and not just a lawyer. And it really doesn't mean whether you're in-house or private practice or your own practice or government. I believe that as lawyers, because of the principles that we represent, the ethics that we have the opportunity, and sometimes the unique one, to call out, what are we doing? Are we standing for integrity? Are we keeping in mind that social license to operate? Where's the courage to do that? And I really hope that you have that kind of conversation. So I'm going to bring my remarks to a little bit of a close here in a moment, because I know you have a lot of questions. I want to have a dialogue, all right? But I want to just sort of recap a little bit about what I think is important. And I really want you to think about the role of lawyers in-house and how important it is to nurture a sense of courage, a culture of courage as we practice our profession. When you consider the Dodd-Frank law, you consider the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act and other statutes where increasingly the pathway to liability leads directly to the C-suite, it leads directly to the boardroom. Our senior leaders need us and most likely want us to be counselors, to have the courage to counsel them on doing the right thing, on earning and maintaining their social license. If you have some time, I encourage you to read a book called Courageous Counsel. I was at an event several weeks ago and I was speaking and there was another GC, another company talking, and we hadn't gotten the chance to align or talk about anything. And the very thing that both of us talked about was courage. The moderator of the event had said, I wanted to provide a presentation to all of you, and the book that she gave us was called Courageous Counsel. And I thought, there's something going on in the legal profession that we're all now talking about courage. There's something going on in our environment that's going to require courage. When you think that the view of business and that the perception of business is so low, I think at an all-time low, business, government, people's confidence at an all-time low. We think about why. Think about what the opportunity then is for lawyers as we're working with businesses and governments to restore that faith, to restore that sense of integrity. And it comes from courage. So the book Courageous Counsel is a compilation of stories about women who are general counsel in Fortune 500 companies. And I think those stories are going to make you laugh. They'll make you think. And I borrow a phrase from Vernon Jordan, who gave the eulogy quite some time ago for Justice Thurgood Marshall. Reading that book is going to make you dream large dreams and work to achieve them. So pull that book when you have a spare moment. You're not doing exams or anything coming up here soon. All right? The next thing I think about when I think about courage is I think about passion. I think courage requires us to have passion, or passion drives us to have courage. Somehow it seems to be a little cyclical. So I want to tell you a little story about passion, my sense of passion. I'm going to move through this so we can talk a bit. But I started out practicing in a law firm in Washington, D.C. Associate, big law firm. In the cases that you handle, you have a partner assigned to you. And my first case involved the rule against perpetuities. A real live case involving the rule against perpetuities. Okay? So we were in Maryland Circuit Court, and the whole thing was just litigious. Try to set depositions. Let's do it Thursday. No, I got to do it Friday. Let's, have a meeting with the judge. Let's do it Wednesday. No, it's got to be Tuesday. Everything litigious. Everything litigious. I'm a new lawyer. I'm loving it. Love the litigiousness, okay? So, in the midst of the whole trial, as we're getting ready for discovery, my client had a heart attack, and we had to postpone some of the proceedings so he could get well, and so he gets his health back, and we were back on track to have the proceedings. And we're Maryland State Court, and at that time you had Judge Tibba, to be announced. You wait in the hallway, and the next judge that was available would be your judge. So you're there, you're schlepping your big boxes of exhibits down to the courthouse. It's freezing cold in the hallway. We wait day one, no judge. Got to take my boxes back home. Okay, come again, partner's there. This is my first trial, right? So finally we get a judge, but by that time, I've got laryngitis. We go, we have the court hearing. First day, it's going all right. I'm doing direct, my first direct examination in the court. I'm feeling pretty good about things. Partner's doing his thing. We recess, we come back the next day. I do more direct, he does the cross. Judge says, let's take a recess. We all stand up, and the next thing you know, thud. I'm thinking, oh my God, my client who had been ill is falling out. I turn to look for him, it's fine. I look the other way in the courtroom. In the well of the court is the other side, the other defendant on the floor. I immediately yell, thinking about the controversy we had, the litigiousness of the matter. He's faking! He's faking! Oh my God, he's faking! I can't believe he's faking! Judge is behind the desk looking out. They call 911 in to check out what's going on. They usher us out of the courthouse. I call back to the office. They all know it's my first trial. They're like, okay, all your associates, how's it going? What's happened? I said, he died! He died! My first trial. Passion. What does it have to do with your topic? I kind of want to break up a little monotony here and talk about real life experience. But really, that really is about, I think you have to have a passion for what you do. When you have that passion, it enables you to be courageous. When you have that passion, you can be courageous advocates for your client. So I really urge you to work your passion, have passion for what you do. The last thing I want to talk about really is that I think being courageous also allows us to welcome diversity and inclusion, both in thought and with people. And they're really so important because when you have diversity and inclusion, diversity of thinking, you get different ideas, different approaches, different resolutions to things that make it very challenging to protect that social license to operate. And I want to point out that in this day and age right now, in the profession, as people come out of law school, that women and people of color are dropping out of the profession in large numbers. I think it's really concerning. This group is also one of the hardest hit when you start looking for jobs in this new normal market that all of you are facing. So I think there's a focus that we need to have in the profession that is critical to the sustainability of our profession, the face of our law schools, the face of our corporate hallways and our communities reflect the face of our society. So I really am going to end, but I want to end with something that I was trolling the internet for something pithy to say. And I actually found something that's really, really, I think, right on point. And they're actually words from Robert Kennedy when he was speaking at the dedication of Kendrick Hall at the San Francisco School of Law. And I want to read that for you and then start our questions. But I also want to know, Robert Kennedy also came to Athens, Georgia and spoke one day. Quite a place, Athens. A lot of people come here. So Robert Kennedy said, the late Justice Jackson and others have said that courage is the most important attribute of a lawyer. It's more important than competence or vision. It can never, never be an elective in any law school. It can never be delimited, dated, or outworn. And it should pervade the heart, the halls of justice, and the chambers of the mind. So now I want to open the floor for us for conversation. Rachel, let us know when we're out of time, right? But let's have a little bit. I really love this time because I love to bring back your thinking and to my colleagues and drive my thinking. So, yes.
How do you think that Coca-Cola's social license and also their strategy towards corporate responsibility, or however you would have phrased it, has changed over the past couple of years as more and more studies about the links between your primary beverage, Coke, and other sugary carbonated beverages and obesity. So how has that changed your philosophy?
Yeah, I think certainly very much. As a company, we're very mindful about the issue of obesity. Very real issue that we face, a very real issue that's faced in the minority community. And our focus about knowing that that concern of our consumers exists, we have to respond to that. We do that by having a portfolio of different beverages that are from your full calorie to your mid to your low calorie, so that there's a portfolio of choice that you can make depending upon what's the need that you have. People have different lifestyles of activity. I'm a full throttle Coca-Cola drinker, but I'm also very active, right? You might not be. So maybe you need one of the low calorie or no calorie beverages that we have. We also understand that we need to encourage activity. We have a program about our Sparks Park program to get kids active, away from all the digital stuff that they're doing, and really encourage an active, balanced lifestyle. We've gone to, and I believe we might actually be one of the first in the industry to do front-of-pack labeling, to provide calorie information on the product that you're buying, so that as a consumer, you know what calories you're consuming. You can make a choice about that. And that is part of the responsiveness to the social license to operate and the demands our consumers have driven. We also believe that it's important to have a lot of facts out there in the marketplace, in these real communities, and not myths. And I came across actually information someone sent me actually just yesterday about some of the thinking that we have around sugary drinks. And that in actuality, I think they take up almost less than 5% of what we consume, and that actually the focus and concern about the intake of sugar happens at home, comes not from sodas, from carbonated beverages and juices, but from foods that people are consuming, from cereals that they're consuming. They're making these choices at home, not in school. So home is the place where all of us, including the Coca-Cola company, need to provide moms and dads and kids with information about how do they have a healthy and active lifestyle. Yes?
First, I have never heard the term social
license to operate,
and that's a wonderful descriptor, and it really resonates. It occurs to me that it is relevant not just in the for-profit world, but in the not-for-profit world.
Yes.
As the Susan G. Komen for the Cure
yes.
found recently.
Yes.
What does an organization do? How does an organization meet a challenge or an attempt to revoke its social license?
Well, I'm going to give an answer, and then I also have my colleague here from Public Affairs, because I think that that's really, the lawyers in Scott Williamson, in our company, that what we do in the social license to operate may have a legal component to it, but there's also that community component, that public affairs component as well. And I say we're wet at the hip. My BlackBerry, Scott's BlackBerry. But it really I think has to do with focusing on what the communication of information, making sure that facts and information are out there, that people are transparent. That whole issue raised a lot of different thoughts about values and beliefs and systems, and someone made a choice to say, well, we're going to go in this direction. And I think sometimes you might need to have a more robust conversation about what's the direction that we're going to go in, what's our agreeing on what's our mission, what's our focus, what's our purpose. Hard to do sometimes in the public space, whereas we talked about and saw that things are instantly communicated. You don't really have the luxury of having some of those slower, quiet conversations to decide. But I think very quickly you saw how the social license of that entity was threatened, all right? And then once it gets damaged, can you get it back? Do you get it back? It's like someone said in the law, once my reputation is challenged, where do I go to get my reputation back? It's the same thing. Where do I go to get my reputation back? Once it's damaged, how do you get it back? So protecting it in the first instance, I think, is so critical. Scott, what would you add to that?
We took the easy part, which is the protecting it before it happened. I think that's the single largest thing, because it's like operating in the ether. Once it sort of dissipates, it's very, very difficult to get back. What we try to do is, working with our legal colleagues and our brand colleagues, is to anticipate the unintended consequences as well as the intended consequences of the decisions that we make from a business standpoint and a brand standpoint. And we do that by having very often a series of sometimes uncomfortable conversations with third parties. We are becoming increasingly aggressive at soft-sounding ideas, whether they be, brand ideas, brand launches, programs and things with our those sort of in the middle, with our detractors as well as with our supporters, to ensure that we have a sort of a full sense of the intended and unintended consequences of the things that we're interested in doing.
So you don't end up talking to ourselves and preaching to the choir. Yes?
I really enjoyed your story about Justice O'Connor wearing the pantsuit, and I'm curious how you envision women now and in the future continuing to break the mold.
In their dress or in other ways? I believe. I think we really, despite, I shouldn't say it, because of all the things that had happened, I think we're really still on the cusp of change. Because when you look at, and whether you're looking at law firms or you're looking at corporations, we're still on the cusp of change. You go into the C-suite, and where are women in those organizations? The number of women still is not where it needs to be, considering the percentage of women that are in the law. In law firms, the percentage of women who are equity partners, still not where it needs to be, considering the number of women who are equity partners. And you know what? We're having the same conversation today that we had 25 years ago when I started practicing law. The same conversation. And I think, I'm going to put it back to you and say, there's got to be more and different things that we can do to push that conversation forward. And I really am looking to you guys, how do we do that? One of the things that we've done in the Coca-Cola company, it started in the legal function. We implemented a program called Living the Values. And we, long before I got there, and I was fortunate to be part of it, decided that we needed to change the face of our outside counsel. That we needed to be sure that women, that people of color, solo practitioners in those spaces had an opportunity to do business with a company like Coca-Cola because we gave them credibility because of our brand. All right? And once they have that, they can then go out and do business with other people and say, I've done work for the Coca-Cola company. And so another entity would say, good enough for them, good enough for us. And we realized how important that was. And we decided that we wanted to use our credibility in a particular way. And we created a Living the Values program. And we require to this day our outside counsel to come to us, not with the lawyers that do the dog and pony show. I've been there, and the managing partner there, or the partner, the billing partner will bring a group of diverse people, they'll bring women with them into an organization. Oh, here are all the women in our organization, and we do all these wonderful things with women. But when it comes to the end of the day, the people who are going to work the case, and get the billables for it, those women are gone. So we really require that they not just come with the face, but they actually staff our cases with the diverse talent that we need. Look at our consumers all around the world. We've got to be able to think like people who are challenging us, quite frankly, and that requires diversity of thought. So we implemented Living the Values, we require diversity of counsel, and we send out a questionnaire every year. We ask them very specific questions about how many women, who's in the pipeline, number of equity partners, what has changed, what are you doing to advance diversity? I've had frank conversations with outside counsel, and I've said, love working with you. Great lawyers. Can't work with you if you're not going to live the values that we have in our organization, our company. And we need our lawyers to look like every single person in this room, regardless of race or gender, or orientation. That's really an imperative. So we went out and implemented that program, and I'll tell you, there was a mad scramble for people to respond. And I think it just shows that there is power to leverage change. You got to figure out how to leverage that power. And I hope that all of you in this room can figure out how to leverage that power to change for the legal profession. You can see I love to talk. My sister said, thank God you became a lawyer because you keep talking. Questions? Yes.
I have a question regarding a comment that you made earlier in your talk. And I could imagine as general counsel in the corporate legal department, given that the Coca-Cola company is your client, essentially facing the issue on a daily basis of trying to enable the business units to do their job within the confines of the law. And how you enable that to happen, or to prevent the business units from circumventing, if you will, the legal department, just so they can accomplish a goal or an end and not think of the legal department as the big bad?
You know, the thing that's been most effective is for the lawyers to embed themselves in the business, to be embedded in the business, to understand how we do business, to understand how we make money. And I have a colleague with me, Bruce Struthers, who's a lawyer on my marketing team. He's raising his hand. He knows what it's like to get embedded in the business, to understand how we do business, and then you become a trusted counselor. Our business colleagues understand, we know the time frame that they're on and being able to shoot promotions. We understand the contract constraints that they're on. We understand some of the supply and demand issues in manufacturing. And when you know that, you know, they said, okay, maybe they understand my business a little bit. When I joined the company, I really didn't know much about beverage companies. Okay? I needed to learn the business. Law school teaches you how to think, and I figure as lawyers, I love this, is why I love the law. We can figure out anything. All right? But developing a relationship of trust takes a different perspective. So I would call different people in the business and I would say, you're going to go out and meet with customers today and talk about some of our sales promotions. Do you mind if I ride along with you? And I go with you and I'd go out with them, spend time with them, understand the business. What are you concerned about? I would ask him. What are your business objectives? How can I assist you in reaching those business objectives? And we do that on a regular basis. We go out, and so then that person says, well, she really kind of is interested in what I'm doing. She cares about it. And when you have that relationship of trust, then they come to you. Then they ask you for advice. Now, this is not to say that sometimes they do things, you got to go and say, you know, you didn't call me. You know, like, you didn't call me. You didn't call us. And so, you know, it means you kind of have to work things out at the back end, and they learn that that takes a little much, makes more time than doing it at the front end. So I think it's the relationship of trust of being a counselor that really changes the dynamics and how the business comes to you and comes to rely on you. So knowing the business, really, really critical. Being viewed as a business partner, really, really critical. But don't cross the line. You know, our general counsel, the company, our former general counsel would say that if your business clients like you, you're probably not doing your job as a lawyer. Right? You need to be, they want to be, you need to be aligned with them, understand them, but you've got to maintain that role as counselor. So they're loving you. Maybe you're not speaking those words of courage to them. Yes?
What specific things can we do as young lawyers who are beginning our career who want to, you know, exhibit these traits that you've talked about, courage and passion? And we want, but we also want to balance that with not being that young associate that all the partners know for the wrong reason.
Yeah, I hear exactly what you're saying. You know, when you're starting out in a career, there are lots of different ways to develop the profession. And I think if you're in, no matter where you're working, I think one of the things that you can do to distinguish yourself is to show how you add value. How do you add, I mean, because that's what companies are asking. You know, shareholders are asking the management add value. Really, when you look at the social license to operate, it really is about companies, how are you adding value? And, you know, I think from an individual basis, how do we add value? Why are we in a particular situation? And there are lots of ways to do that starting out. Maybe you're the person that knows all the facts in a particular case. You've got your handle on the facts of the case. And if that's the case, you know, you've spent the evening looking at all the information, understanding what the challenges the business wants to X, Y, Z, and I've got a meeting tomorrow, I'm going to bring you with me. I'm going to call you and say, come with me, partner with me, because I really need your expertise. So you have to think about different ways, you know, to add value. How do you have courage and have passion? I think we do it every single day. I'll tell you, I think the fact that you're here, you're going to law school in this new normal market, whatever it is, you know, you're really exhibiting, I think, a courage and passion about the law. And I was talking to someone the other day about law school, and one of the deans of admissions for Georgetown. We were talking about, you know, preparing kids for a profession, and we don't quite know where it's going to be in 2020. You know, I think there's so much change that's going on, so much wonderful change going on, that the thing that we have to do is make sure that we create opportunities, you know, for passion, create opportunities for you to stretch and grow. So I'd say look for very small, or, you know, some of the Justice O'Connor wearing a pantsuit, small, ordinary ways to have courage. It is most of the time in life, life's real ordinary. My dad always calls me and says, Leslie, what's happening special today? I'm like, it's just an ordinary day, Dad. It's another day. But that's, really where I think the ability to see something for yourself can occur in that space. I'm rattling on. I haven't answered your question, I'm sure, but we'll talk about it later. Rachel, are we running out of time? And we're out of time.
One last question, so it's going to be the lucky person.
Yes.
You spoke about nurturing such birds with some passion included. And we had the recent tragedy with the youth in Sanford, Florida, these days of homeland insecurity eroding constitutional rights, it seems. And do you have comments, criticisms, and advice for citizens' pro se, pro bono effort to constructively confront law enforcement / legal government system for a positive change for citizens' constitutional rights?
I don't have anything specific because it's hard to do that without knowing the specifics of the matter. But I would say, you think about the whole movement that was occurring when people were coming out and they were really concerned about what's happening in our society. And people, our society has always been a place where you can give voice to what are concerns about fairness, about tolerance, about inequality. And I think you can find, whether it's on an individual basis or in different groups, that there is this space in our society to do that. And that's something we don't see anywhere else. There are hundreds of different ways to do that. I was telling someone the other day, the thing that amazed me most about being in this environment is, and I've traveled all around the world, I had the opportunity to bring some of our lawyers from China to the United States. And they were doing the Supreme Court tour with me. They were seeing different things. And I wanted to impress them with the Supreme Court visit. I wanted to impress them with the Library of Congress and all these different things in Washington. And the thing that amazed them the most, as you're walking down the street, were all the news boxes, the newspaper boxes on the street corner. And they were amazed about that because they said it provided access to information that they didn't have. And access to information is a powerful way to create and promote change. So you think about technology, all the clampdown on the internet we're seeing around the world. It's all about, I think, access to information and how you use it that gives us the power to promote the change that we think important. So I think my time's come to an end. Be around for a little bit, get a chance hopefully to talk and interact a little bit more. I thank you for your patience. I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Ms. Turner, for being with us here today. We are truly honored that you were able to come speak with us this afternoon. On behalf of the Women Law Student Association, I would also like to thank Dean Rebecca White, Assistant Dean Paul Kurtz, and our Professor Advisor Sarah Jane Love for being here today. Also, we would like to thank the entire faculty and staff of the law school for their support of this lecture. The Edith House Lecture Series of Law is made possible only through the generous donations of our alumni, faculty, students, and friends of the Edith House Endowment Fund. And most of all, we would like to thank you all for coming to this event this afternoon. We hope you will join us in the rotunda of the law school for the reception following this event, and we hope that you all have a wonderful rest of the afternoon. Thank you.